No one who attended the Winter Ascension banquet would ever admit what they truly felt that evening. They smiled. They toasted. They applauded. Yet beneath the polished marble floors of Blackhaven Manor, every guest sensed the invisible tension stretching tighter with every passing minute. Powerful families from across the Adriatic underworld filled the enormous ballroom, their designer suits and glittering gowns hiding years of blood-stained alliances. Tonight was supposed to celebrate the future. Instead, history was preparing a funeral. At the center of the ballroom stood 19-year-old Lucien Varga. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair brushed neatly away from his face, he looked every bit the heir his family expected him to become. Unlike many young men born into power, he carried himself without arrogance. His calm green eyes studied people more often than mirrors, and he preferred silence over empty boasts. His father often said that the loudest wolf rarely survived the winter. Lucien believed him. The orchestra finished its final piece as servants carried crystal glasses filled with vintage champagne through the crowd. Hundreds of candles reflected from towering windows overlooking the snow-covered cliffs beyond the estate. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Lucien noticed tiny details most people ignored. A security guard he had never seen before standing near the eastern entrance. 2 chauffeurs whispering beside vehicles that should already have left. 3 servants avoiding eye contact whenever the family crest came into view. Individually, none of it meant anything. Together, it felt wrong. You've barely touched your drink. The gentle voice belonged to Elena Drakov. 17 years old, she stood near one of the grand columns wearing a midnight blue gown embroidered with silver vines that shimmered beneath the chandeliers. Unlike the other daughters of powerful families, she wore almost no jewelry. Her long chestnut hair rested over one shoulder, and thoughtful gray eyes quietly observed the room instead of searching for attention. Lucien offered a polite smile. I've learned important conversations happen after everyone else starts drinking. A faint laugh escaped her. My father says exactly the opposite. Lucien glanced toward Viktor Drakov. The man stood near the fireplace speaking with senators, businessmen, and foreign investors as though tonight were merely another elegant charity gala. Nothing about Viktor appeared threatening. His charcoal suit was immaculate. His silver hair perfectly combed. His smile calm. But Lucien had heard stories. Men disappeared after shaking Viktor's hand. Companies collapsed after refusing his offers. Entire organizations vanished without anyone ever finding a body. Violence wasn't Viktor's favorite weapon. Patience was. You don't seem happy tonight, Elena said quietly. Lucien looked back at her. Should I be? Tonight changes everything. It changes my responsibilities. She studied him for several seconds before nodding. I suppose those aren't the same thing. Before Lucien could answer, applause erupted across the ballroom. His father stepped onto the elevated platform. Adrian Varga commanded attention without asking for it. Nearly 60 years old, his shoulders remained straight despite decades spent ruling one of Europe's oldest criminal empires. A faint scar crossed one cheek, earned long before wealth had replaced battlefields. He raised one hand. Silence immediately followed. Tonight, Adrian began, my son officially becomes the future guardian of our house. The guests lifted their glasses. Lucien walked toward the platform. This moment had been prepared since childhood. Years of education. Languages. Finance. Negotiation. Combat. History. Everything had led here. His father placed an ancient silver signet ring into his hand. It has belonged to every leader of our family for over 200 years. Lucien closed his fingers around it. I'll honor it. I know. For the first time that evening, Adrian smiled like a father instead of a ruler. The orchestra resumed playing. Conversations returned. Servants circulated through the crowd. Then, every chandelier went dark. The ballroom disappeared into complete silence. Someone laughed nervously. A second later, the emergency lights flashed crimson. The first gunshot shattered the music. Another followed. Then 6 more. Screams exploded across the room. Guests threw themselves behind tables. Crystal shattered. Bullets ripped through towering windows. The orchestra scattered in panic. Lucien instinctively shoved his father behind a marble pillar as armed men stormed through every entrance. Black tactical uniforms. No insignias. Military precision. They weren't raiders. They were professionals. Stay down. Adrian shouted. Lucien grabbed a fallen security officer's handgun. Across the ballroom, familiar faces suddenly raised weapons against House Varga. Bodyguards. Drivers. Senior advisors. Men who had eaten beside them for years. Traitors. The realization struck harder than any bullet. This wasn't an attack. It was an execution plan from the inside. One betrayal after another unfolded before Lucien's eyes. His chief accountant calmly opened the western doors. His communications director handed over encrypted tablets. Even members of the estate security team removed their earpieces and joined the invaders. 5 years. Maybe longer. Someone had been building this moment for years. Adrian fired twice. 2 attackers collapsed. More immediately replaced them. Lucien ducked as marble exploded above his head. Smoke drifted across the ballroom. Fire alarms screamed overhead. Somewhere nearby, a child cried before being pulled away by frightened relatives. Through the chaos, one figure walked calmly toward the center of the room. Viktor Drakov. He carried no weapon. He didn't need one. Every armed man instinctively stepped aside for him. His polished shoes echoed against shattered marble. He stopped less than 10 feet from Adrian. "You fought harder than expected," Viktor said almost pleasantly. Adrian slowly lowered his pistol. "I trusted you. You trusted everyone. That was your mistake." Viktor sighed almost sympathetically. "I spent 5 years purchasing your empire." He gestured around the room. "Your banker." One man stepped forward. "Your chief of security." Another. "Half your council." More faces appeared. Lucien stared in disbelief. People who had attended birthdays, funerals, family dinners, all stood behind Viktor now. Money hadn't bought them. Fear had. Adrian laughed. A tired, disappointed laugh. "You mistake obedience for loyalty." "No." Viktor smiled. "I simply understand which one lasts longer." Without warning, Adrian lunged. The hidden knife beneath his jacket flashed toward Viktor's throat. A single gunshot echoed. Adrian froze, then slowly looked down. Dark blood spread across his white shirt. He collapsed to one knee. Lucien roared and charged. 3 men tackled him before he reached his father. He fought like someone possessed. One guard hit the floor with a broken nose. Another slammed into a banquet table. A third received Lucien's elbow beneath his jaw. Still, numbers overwhelmed strength. Hands pinned his arms. Another forced him to his knees. Across the room, Elena stood frozen. Her horrified eyes darted between her father and Lucien. "Father." Her voice barely existed. Viktor never looked at her. "Take the air." Lucien struggled again. "If you're going to kill me?" Viktor finally met his eyes. "Kill you?" He smiled almost kindly. "No. Death creates martyrs." His expression hardened. "I prefer witnesses." He crouched beside Lucien. "You will disappear. The world will believe you died tonight. And every day afterward, you'll pray they were right." Heavy iron shackles locked around Lucien's wrists. A black hood covered his face. As guards dragged him through smoke-filled corridors beneath Blackhaven Manor, he listened to the sounds fading behind him. More gunfire. Breaking glass. Then, silence. Minutes later, cold air surrounded him. Stone walls echoed with dripping water. An ancient iron door groaned open. The hood was ripped away. Lucien found himself inside an abandoned wine vault buried deep beneath the estate. Centuries-old brick walls surrounded rusted iron bars. One narrow bed. One bucket. One tiny window far beyond reach that revealed nothing except darkness. The guards shoved him inside. Chains rattled. The heavy door slammed shut. Locks clicked one after another. Lucien stood motionless. Everything was gone. His family. His home. His future. Far above, Blackhaven Manor celebrated its new ruler. Deep beneath its foundations, the rightful heir disappeared into history. Only one person saw where the guards had taken him. Hidden behind stacks of forgotten barrels, Elena watched with trembling hands pressed against her mouth. Her father hadn't buried a prisoner. He had buried hope itself. And for reasons she couldn't yet explain. She knew she would never be able to walk away. The first night in the underground vault taught Lucien one lesson. Hope disappeared faster than light. No sunrise reached the stone chamber beneath Blackhaven Manor. No clocks marked the passing hours. Only the slow drip of water echoing through ancient brick tunnels reminded him that time still existed somewhere beyond the iron bars. He refused to sit, refused to cry, refused to scream. His father had taught him long ago that panic was a luxury enemies wanted you to waste. Instead, Lucien began counting. Every drop of water. Every footstep above. Every creak in the ceiling. Every shift change. Every sound became information. On the third day he memorized the routine of the guards. One carried heavy boots that scraped across the floor. Another limped slightly. The oldest guard coughed before unlocking the outer gate. None of them realized the prisoner was studying them. By the end of the first week, Lucien knew their schedules better than they did. He wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. He was preparing for survival. Above ground, Blackhaven Manor no longer felt like a home. Portraits of the Varga family had disappeared from the walls. Their crest had been replaced by House Drakov's silver wolf. Servants spoke in whispers. Nobody laughed anymore. The estate had become quieter, yet somehow far more frightening. Elena wandered through endless hallways like a ghost. Every room reminded her of the massacre. She still heard shattered glass whenever silence settled. Still saw frightened faces whenever she closed her eyes. Most unbearable of all, she couldn't forget the final look Lucien had given her before the guards dragged him away. Not accusation. Not hatred. Only disbelief. She tried convincing herself there was nothing she could do. Her father controlled every entrance to the basement. Every guard answered directly to him. Helping Lucien would mean betraying her own family. Yet every night she dreamed of iron bars. On the 9th evening, curiosity defeated fear. She waited until long after midnight. When the final security patrol crossed the eastern corridor, she quietly slipped from her bedroom carrying only a lantern. The basement entrance was hidden behind an old wine cellar. Most servants believed it had been abandoned years earlier. Elena descended the narrow stone staircase one careful step at a time. The air became colder. Damp. Heavy with the smell of rust and ancient stone. She reached a thick iron door. Voices echoed beyond it. Two guards played cards beside a small stove. One eventually complained about needing fresh coffee. The younger guard volunteered to fetch it. Minutes later the older man wandered toward the washroom. For less than 30 seconds. The corridor stood empty. Elena's heart pounded so loudly she feared someone would hear it. She hurried forward. Rows of forgotten prison cells stretched into darkness. Most were empty. Then she saw him. Lucien sat against the far wall, eyes closed, one arm resting across a bent knee. His expensive suit had become wrinkled and stained with dust. His face looked thinner. But the moment he sensed movement, his eyes opened. Sure. Alert. Alive. For several long seconds neither of them spoke. Finally he stood. I wasn't expecting visitors. His voice remained calm. Almost emotionless. Elena swallowed. I wanted to know if you were alive. I suppose that answers your question. She stepped closer to the bars. I'm sorry. Lucien studied her carefully. For what? My father's actions. You didn't pull the trigger. But he did. Silence stretched between them. I know apologizing changes nothing. No. It doesn't. He wasn't cruel. Just honest. Elena lowered her eyes. I should leave. She turned. Wait. She looked back. Lucien's expression had softened almost imperceptibly. Thank you. For checking. She nodded once before disappearing into the darkness. Days passed. Neither expected another meeting. Yet she returned. This time carrying a small loaf of bread hidden beneath her coat. I wasn't sure if they'd feed you. Lucien accepted it after only a brief hesitation. They do. He broke the loaf open. It usually tastes older than the prison. Despite everything. A tiny smile escaped Elena. It vanished almost immediately. Lucien noticed. You should smile more often. She blinked. You've been locked underground for nearly 2 weeks. And you're worried about my smile? It's proof the world hasn't completely fallen apart. For the first time since the coup. They laughed. Only for a second. But it mattered. Weeks became months. Their conversations slowly grew longer. Sometimes Elena brought books. Sometimes fresh fruit. Sometimes newspapers so Lucien could understand how Victor was reshaping the criminal empire. The world believed House Varga had perished. Official reports claimed Lucien died protecting his father. Funeral ceremonies were held. New alliances formed. The heir had already become history. Only 2 people knew otherwise. One lived behind iron bars. The other carried the secret alone. Lucien never wasted the time. He exercised inside the tiny cell every day. Push-ups. Squats. Shadow boxing. Stretching. When space became too limited, he practiced balance. When exhaustion arrived, he trained his memory. Using tiny scratches beneath the bed, he recorded guard rotations. He memorized every key hanging from the jailer's belt. Every lock. Every hinge. Every weakness in the underground prison. Elena watched him one afternoon. You still believe you'll escape? I don't believe. You know? I prepare. She considered that answer. What if they keep you here forever? Lucien looked toward the narrow ceiling. Forever is built one day at a time. His confidence fascinated her. Most prisoners would have surrendered months ago. Lucien became stronger. Not physically, mentally. His prison had become a classroom. Winter melted into spring. Flowers bloomed across the estate gardens above. Down below, nothing changed. Except them. Their conversations drifted away from survival. Elena admitted she loved painting landscapes she would probably never visit. Lucien confessed he secretly enjoyed restoring antique mechanical clocks with his grandfather before the old man died. She laughed. You? I'm surprisingly patient. I noticed. He smiled faintly. And you? I've never climbed a mountain. You live beside one. My father doesn't allow unnecessary adventures. Lucien stared at the stone floor. Then one day you'll climb one. You sound certain. I don't make promises. I make plans. Something inside Elena shifted. For years she had believed power belonged to whoever controlled fear. Lucien believed power belonged to whoever refused to surrender hope. It was a dangerous difference. One rainy evening she arrived later than usual. Lucien immediately noticed her trembling hands. What happened? She hesitated. My father. Her voice cracked. He questioned every servant today. Lucien straightened. Why? He thinks someone is helping you. Silence settled over the cell. They searched bedrooms. They questioned guards. They even dismissed 3 kitchen workers. Lucien's jaw tightened. You can't come back. Elena stared at him. What? If he catches you? I know. No. You don't. He stepped closer to the bars. My life is already gone. Yours isn't. She looked directly into his eyes. You're wrong. He frowned. The night you were imprisoned. The part of my life that felt safe disappeared too. Neither spoke. The truth hung heavily between them. Finally Lucien reached through the bars as far as his chains allowed. His fingertips barely touched hers. Only for a heartbeat. Neither pulled away. Neither spoke. The moment ended when distant footsteps echoed through the corridor. Elena quickly stepped back. I have to go. Wait. She paused. If something happens. Lucien said quietly. Burn every letter. She looked confused. What letters? The ones you'll write after I'm gone. She felt tears threaten to appear. You really think you're funny? No. I think you're brave. She disappeared up the staircase just as 2 guards entered the basement carrying lanterns. Lucien returned to the shadows before they noticed anything unusual. Above them, Viktor Drakov stood alone in his study, reading a report from his chief of security. One sentence caught his attention. The prisoner appears healthier than expected. Viktor slowly closed the folder. Someone, somewhere inside his own household, had chosen compassion over obedience. He smiled. Not because he was pleased, because he enjoyed hunting secrets. And this one had finally revealed itself. The game had entered its most dangerous stage. The first mistake Viktor Drakov made was believing every prison had walls. The second was believing every prisoner eventually surrendered. Nearly 2 years had passed since Lucien Varga disappeared beneath Blackhaven Manor. The world no longer spoke his name. Newspaper headlines called him a tragic casualty of the coup. Politicians toasted Viktor's leadership. Foreign investors praised the stability of House Drakov. The old dynasty had become a memory, exactly as Viktor intended. Yet beneath the estate, the forgotten heir had become something entirely different. Every day had sharpened his patience. Every injury had strengthened his resolve. Every conversation with Elena had reminded him there was still something worth protecting. He no longer dreamed of revenge. He dreamed of ending the cycle that had destroyed both of their families. Viktor stood before the fireplace in his private study reading another security report. Nothing unusual. Guard rotations complete. No attempted escapes. No suspicious visitors. Yet one sentence refused to leave his mind. The prisoner continues to display unusually strong morale. That irritated him. People survived pain. Few survived hope. Someone was feeding it. Someone inside his own household had betrayed him. He ordered every servant questioned again. Bedrooms searched. Personal belongings burned. Kitchen staff replaced. No evidence appeared. Only frightened faces. He smiled. Fear always made people careless. Eventually, someone would make a mistake. That mistake almost happened 3 nights later. Elena carried a small cloth bag hidden beneath her cloak. Inside were dried fruit, medicine, a map of the estate she had secretly copied, and a tiny brass compass she had found in the abandoned library. She reached the basement staircase, then froze. Voices. Guards. Too many. She quietly stepped behind a stone pillar as 4 armed men descended. Search every cell. The master believes someone has been helping him. Elena stopped breathing. The guards entered Lucien's cell. They overturned his bed. Examined every stone. Searched every crack. One guard picked up the fantasy novel Elena had brought months earlier. He flipped through every page before throwing it into the fireplace. The book burned within seconds. Lucien never moved. Never protested. Never looked toward the staircase where Elena hid. His silence saved her. After nearly an hour the guards finally left. Only then did she enter. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They destroyed everything." Lucien looked toward the dying fire. "No. They destroyed paper. There is a difference." That night he made his decision. Waiting was no longer enough. Escape required opportunity. Opportunity required distraction. And distractions always came from human weakness. Over the following weeks Lucien deliberately changed his routine. He stopped exercising. Stopped speaking. Stopped eating properly. The guards relaxed. Their prisoner looked defeated. Exactly as planned. One evening the youngest guard entered alone carrying fresh water. He unlocked the cell carelessly. Only halfway. Lucien collapsed onto the floor pretending to struggle for breath. The frightened guard stepped inside. "Get up." No response. He crouched. That single moment changed everything. Lucien exploded into motion. Years of controlled training returned instantly. One elbow. One twist. The guard lost consciousness before he could shout. Lucien caught the falling keys. Locked the unconscious guard inside the cell. Then disappeared into the darkness. He didn't run toward freedom. He ran toward knowledge. Hidden passages his grandfather had once shown him still existed behind forgotten wine shelves. Ancient servant tunnels connected nearly every wing of Blackhaven Manor. Most had been sealed decades earlier. Not all. Lucien reached a concealed passage leading behind the library walls. There. He waited. Hours later Elena entered carrying another bag of food. She gasped. "You escaped." "Not yet." She stared. "What do you mean?" "If I leave tonight, they'll hunt us forever." "So what?" Lucien unfolded the estate map she had copied. "I don't want to survive. I want to win." For 3 more weeks Lucien remained hidden inside forgotten tunnels beneath the estate. Everyone believed he had fled into the mountains. Victor ordered roadblocks across 3 countries. Private airports closed. Ports searched. Rewards offered. Mercenaries flooded the region. Meanwhile, the man they hunted never left the estate. Each night Elena secretly carried him food. Each day Lucien observed. Counted. Listened. Studied Victor's meetings. Discovered names. Bank accounts. Secret alliances. Corrupt politicians. Bribed judges. Smuggling routes. The greatest prison had become the greatest source of intelligence. Finally, he left. Not through the front gate. Not across the mountains. But aboard an abandoned maintenance boat drifting unnoticed beneath the cliffs. By sunrise, the heir everyone believed dead had vanished. The following year became known as the Year of Ashes. No one understood what was happening. One illegal shipping fleet disappeared overnight. Anonymous documents exposed money laundering inside Victor's largest bank. Authorities raided hidden warehouses. Trusted allies suddenly abandoned House Dracoff. Encrypted financial records leaked to rival organizations. Entire fortunes vanished. Not through violence. Through precision. Lucien never attacked the empire. He removed its foundations. One stone at a time. People began whispering. The ghost of Blackhaven has returned. No one had seen him. Yet his influence spread everywhere. Victor grew desperate. Only one conclusion remained. There is a traitor. His eyes settled on Elena. She stood silently inside his study. You visited him. She didn't answer. You fed him. Still silence. You helped him escape. Elena finally lifted her head. Yes. The confession echoed through the room. Victor neither shouted nor struck her. That frightened her more. He simply rang a silver bell. Guards entered immediately. Prepare the execution platform. The guards hesitated. My lord. I gave an order. Within hours the courtyard filled with soldiers. Servants watched from windows. Rain began falling over Blackhaven Manor. Elena walked calmly toward the platform. She felt strangely peaceful. At least Lucien had escaped. At least one life had been saved. That was enough. Victor addressed the crowd. Let this remind everyone. Betrayal always ends the same. He raised one hand. The executioner lifted his sword. Then, a deep horn echoed beyond the estate gates. Every head turned. A convoy of black vehicles slowly entered the courtyard. Not with guns raised. With legal warrants. International investigators. Financial crime officers. Journalists. Behind them walked Lucien Varga. No longer dressed like a prisoner. He wore a dark tailored suit. Calm. Confident. Unbroken. The crowd fell silent. Many guards lowered their weapons in disbelief. Lucien stopped a few yards from Victor. You've lost. Victor laughed softly. I still have an army. Lucien shook his head. No. You have employees. He held up a folder. Every secret account. Every bribed official. Every illegal shipment. Every murder ordered under your name. One by one. Several commanders stepped away from Victor. Then more. No one wanted to fall beside a collapsing empire. For the first time in decades, Victor stood alone. The executioner's sword lowered. No one obeyed him anymore. He looked at Lucien. You should kill me. Lucien walked closer. I wanted to. For a very long time. He looked toward Elena. Then back at Victor. But if I become you, everything she risked becomes meaningless. Lucien removed the silver signet ring his father had given him 2 years earlier. He slipped it onto his finger once more. I won't build my future on another execution. Security officers surrounded Victor. Not as conquerors. As law. The man who had ruled through fear was led away in handcuffs while every camera captured his fall. 3 years later, Blackhaven Manor looked different. The prison beneath the estate no longer held prisoners. Its walls had been converted into a museum documenting the crimes of every family that had once ruled through violence. Lucien refused to erase history. He believed people learned more from scars than statues. House Varga no longer operated in the shadows. Its wealth funded international security firms, disaster relief programs, and maritime protection across the Adriatic. Power had finally found a different purpose. One spring morning Lucien and Elena stood together on the same cliff overlooking the sea where the old empire had once celebrated fear. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers instead of gunpowder. Elena smiled. So, you finally escaped. Lucien gently took her hand. No. He looked toward the sunrise spreading across the water. We both did. Behind them, Blackhaven Manor stood not as a fortress of terror, but as proof that even the darkest prison could never bury hope forever.